Hi guys, welcome to Sports Scene Culture Conversations powered by Reebok. My name is Robyn Galloway, and as you can tell, I'm not your usual host, but I promise you're in capable hands because Larai couldn't join us today. Today we are going to be diving into the conversation of blessees and blessers, and I am joined by Jackie Phamotse, who will be lending her knowledge into today's sensitive topic. Hi Jackie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Robyn?
I'm so great, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's amazing to be here. Thank you so much to Blackbrick for giving us this space. So today's conversation, we're going to be delving into the blessee and blesser culture. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also why you would be here? Where does the story start with you?
Crazy. Very crazy. So I was born here in South Africa, but in Soweto. But I grew up in Western area, which is most probably like 15 Ks from Soweto. And then when I was a bit older, 19, I moved to Johannesburg just after I matriculated. I think that's where my journey of writing started, where the story became reality really. Because what I decided to do with my career after many mishaps, I started writing my true life story, right? So when I was 19, I dated a very wealthy human being. Extremely embarrassing, but here we are. When I was 19, I dated that guy, but he had some political influence, but he was also very narcissistic. For 3 years, obviously people will say, but you were dating a wealthy guy, things were going great. Why is it so bad? Why would you want to talk about it now? Why is it a big deal? It's because it's becoming culture and it's becoming very popular. But when I dated him, obviously, like most young people, I mean, I was 19, I didn't know he was really wealthy until I was in the relationship. I didn't even know what the intention of the relationship was. So I dated him by virtue of a friend inviting me to a golf dinner. And then that's where the introduction happened, and that's where I met him. And then I dated him for 3 years. So a lot happened in between that, I think, and I think it's one of the things that you would want to discuss with me.
Yeah, 100%. I think you've touched on quite a number of things, but I think definitely one thing is that it's become part of our culture. A lot of young people are entering these relationships with wealthy men, and not only women, but men and women alike are entering these relationships in which they are financially supported.
Yes.
And so what do you think you would need to tell young people, just very briefly? Like, what would you say are the dangers of entering a relationship that is of this nature?
There's a wide array of dangers. Obviously, for example, if you're dating a psychopath, they would be extremely obsessive, extremely controlling, whether they control your finances or your mental state or what you wear or what you eat, where you go, who your friends are, or even things like going as far as ostracizing you from your family. And then there are cases where obviously you've got the health issues, STDs and HIV. A lot of rapes happen in these type of circles. A lot of human trafficking, sex organ sales, international tradings of girls and men and young boys and children, women being used as gestational carriers for rich people's babies without their concerns, illegal abortions. So there's a wide array of dangers. And then you've got things like getting into drugs and alcohol, excessive alcohol use, where you feel like you're in a lifestyle that you cannot control because every weekend you're drinking, that leads to every day you drinking. Sometimes you drop out of school because now you are with this person and they want to travel, they want to take you to places, and you sort of lose that opportunity to do other things like work, study, and maybe explore if you've got entrepreneurial ventures that you want to go to. But because you're with this person 24 hours and you're literally on call, because when they call, you have to be there, right? When they need you to answer the phone, you have to respond. If they want you to travel, you have to be there as is and when they want. So those are the opportunity costs that come with it. And yes, we might say, okay, fine, we've got the risks, but what are the pros? Yes, you get the luxury things, whether it's your hair, it's a cell phone, a gadget, a holiday, a spa treatment. But one thing for sure, they hardly pay for your school fees. It's very rare that you would get a sugar daddy or a blesser or a sponsor that would literally pay for your education. Most of the time, they just use you for lifestyle or a status upgrade or entertainment. But see, the pros are actually less than the cons.
I think definitely when looking at the pros and the cons, some people might see the pros outweighing the cons based off of where they come from, what their family was like, what their socioeconomic background looks like. And I would definitely say that as much as there are a lot of cons, I think the pros need to be addressed in a way in which we're saying that, okay, cool, like you get these nice things, but with that, there are also a lot of cons that potentially, well, like for a lot of people would outweigh the pros. So I think that we need to be able to address the
and
fact
also it's expectation. What are you expecting out of the relationship, right? So someone would say, well, my intention is to have a stable boyfriend. And then the blesser or the sponsor would say, no, I just need you to be a trophy. So when I go to events, you'll be there. When I have social gatherings, you will be there. But I'm not going to marry you. I don't want to be seen in public in certain spaces with you, like business trips. You're not the type of girl that I would take. So they would have multiple. And you would be then exposed to the knowledge of you not being the only one, which has a lot of psychological trauma that leads to depression. Then you've got situations where they would say, okay, fine, I have a wife. You'll be girlfriend number 2 or number 3. Are you comfortable with that? And remember now, this leads to a lot of unprotected sex. Then he will say, you've got other people who will say, no, I'm comfortable with just receiving the money. So whatever girlfriend allowance or whatever allowance you give me, I'm comfortable with that. But are you open to having multiple partners with your blesser? So he would say, I'm bisexual. So I sleep with girls and boys and I still have a wife. Are you comfortable with that? So that's the choices you'll need to make. And sometimes you don't even know until maybe you find him cheating or whatever. But other girls are comfortable with receiving the money or receiving the gifts they have. That's okay for them. Then they get to travel and post online. We see this on social media a lot, where girls post that they went to George, Cape Town, Mauritius, or Dubai, wherever. They're comfortable with having access to things. Not that they have a relationship, they have access to things and people. But the question then is your intention purely to have access or to have a relationship? Or you're comfortable having a boyfriend, which is other people will say a side name, of your own, and then having this person finance your relationship with your partner that you are potentially hiding, right? So it could be a person of the same age as you or the same, age bracket, right? Then you have this older person who's funding, paying for your accommodation, wherever you're staying, maybe paying for your well-being, but you're not in a relationship, they're just sponsoring. But other people are uncomfortable with terms. So a normal term that would be escorting. So you're escorting this person to certain things, therefore you get paid for it. Other people will say, but that is a bit extreme. But then does it not sound like prostitution? Because then you are sleeping or you're providing a service to an individual in return for a phone, a trip, or a holiday, or even something as small, peculiar like hair, right? But then somebody else will also say, but when you have a boyfriend, your boyfriend has to provide. Isn't that a means of provision, right? So it depends on what the intention is. If it's clear it's a relationship, a boyfriend can give their girlfriend flowers or a holiday or whatever. So that is expected in a relationship. But if your intention is a trade, then that it has a whole different definition. You cannot just say because a person has dated an individual of a certain age, they are an escort. They are not. Age does not determine a relationship. It's the intention of the relationship. So even if somebody is 5 years or 10 or 20 years older, if the intention of the relationship is to have a committed relationship, that's a relationship. Because that's how polygamy and all these other things start, right? But the intent of the relationship makes it different to what we can call blesser, blessee, or sponsor.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's a large array of options that people have. And I think that also bearing in mind that people are very young when they are entering these relationships. Yes. It's hard for someone that is 18, 19, 20, 21 even to be making such big decisions like this that actually affect their entire lives.
Yes.
So I think when entering these kinds of relationships, it's so important to remember that not only are you, okay, cool, like you've got all the nice things, and yes, there are the dangers, but as well as that, not only, it's not something that will affect your life for the time that you are in that relationship.
It's a huge opportunity cost. If you look at a relationship like that, it's extremely dominating and very oppressive, because at some point they make decisions on your behalf. Where you go, what you eat, who your friends are, what you drink. Something as simple as, do I want to have sex or not? The lines of consent is very blurred in those relationships. So there are times where you would not want to have sex and you're forced to have sex. And there are times where you're forced to have sex with multiple people because you're in a different setting, or maybe you're in a different country or different province where you're unable to give consent. Because now the risk is, will I have a flight ticket to come back home? If I want to leave at any given time, will I have the option to leave? And sometimes you give consent because those lines are blurred, where you're like, if I say no, I will not be able to go home. There are many, many people who get stuck in different provinces after they have a weekend away with someone and they fight with the person and they feel uncomfortable or they just feel unsafe and they're unable to come back. So they sort of pushed into a corner to give consent for things that they would not necessarily do in that environment. So we must be aware that yes, it is an individual choice to date an older person of any financial standing, regardless of their rich or poor. But there's a lot of other things that could lead to being unable to make correct choices. If you have pre-existing mental issues, things like mental psychosis, if you are schizophrenic, if you have depression, borderline eating disorders, when you're in those relationships, when you have to make decisions and you've got those underlying issues, the lines are blurred. Because if you're, for an example, if you're on a medication for depression, anything can trigger you. You can be triggered by a small fight. You can be triggered by scents. People get upset at certain scents because it reminds them of something that has happened in their childhood. If you have sex with somebody and you were raped at a young age and this person reminds you of that, you cannot give consent because now you're in this relationship where money is given and you don't really have a say. And obviously, it's not like you are in a relationship with this person where you're given the freedom to have an opinion or to express your childhood trauma. They're not going to take you to therapy. They don't have time for that.
You touched on two things that are really, really important. Number one being the mental health aspects of being in these relationships. And I think that 100% any of the mental illnesses that you've mentioned, whether it be depression, anxiety, possibly an eating disorder, borderline personality disorder, no matter what it is, I think those can really be sent into overdrive with these kinds of relationships. Being put down and having to be in a relationship where your partner is so dominant over you can really, number one, push you down. It can push your
self-esteem.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think that also, if you are on any medication that might help with your depression, anxiety, no matter what it is, obviously those things won't be able to do their job if you're under the influence of alcohol, under the influence of other drugs, no matter what it is. So I definitely think that that's one thing that needs to be taken into consideration. The mental health issues that we've mentioned now, combined with the social media pressures that we currently experience in our society, in these relationships, I think that can definitely be a driving force for people to get into these relationships. Social media plays a massive role in, because everything that we see on a daily basis is driven by social media. When we open our phones, we go onto Instagram, we go onto Twitter, and we're seeing these luxurious holidays, cars, gifts. And from the receiving end, sometimes you don't know that the person that is posting this is actually in a relationship with an older man that has money, that is potentially a politician, someone with power, etc., etc. So I think 100% social media plays a pivotal role in these relationships and what drives women and men alike to get into these kinds of relationships.
Yeah, social media has grown to be a monster on its own, as much as it's got beautiful positive things like people finding jobs, people getting helped online, people being able to promote their businesses online, and young people discovering new talents online and things that they want to do with social media. I mean, you see the likes of social media influencers who are big on YouTube and Instagram, them making money out of it. However, the flip side of dating a person, or people who lie about being influencers online, but in retrospect, they're actually dating people that fund their lifestyles. Then you have a young person who's online just watching this specific person on their feed and saying, oh, this person is very successful, I want to be like them, only to find out that the career they say they're in is not paying for what they're doing. But social media makes it so misleading, because you can only post the best parts of your life, which is 2 seconds. And then we believe that that is your life in totality. Whereas you just shot a picture next to your car and the car was not even yours. It was in somebody else's driveway. And now we believe it because you want to show us that as it being the highlight of your life. So people who are in these blessee relationships, they are very good at pretending and faking a lifestyle. They are pros at it because that's what it requires you to be seen in a certain light. And social media enhances that, and it makes it more alluring, where now a blesser can DM you and say, I love how you look like, I saw your pictures, I would like to take you on holiday. Some girls even go as far as saying, hi, I've got a guy who is comfortable with me and you having a threesome. Would you be open to doing that because we saw your pictures online? We'll pay you so much. Or I've got a friend who is hosting a party. Would you be comfortable to come to a party? We'll pay you so much. So those are the trade-offs. And social media makes it so hard for people to resist a certain lifestyle, because we all look at our lives and you're like, shoot, I should be doing so well. Look at my peers. They're so far ahead. They're posting all these great things, but I'm still in varsity. I'm still a waiter. I'm still trying to figure things out. Or maybe I just come from a very horrible background. I just want a lifestyle upgrade. And you see it online, you're thinking that if I just respond to this DM, my life would change like that. And unfortunately, people do it. And yes, it's a choice. But are you willing to be a sacrifice?
A lot of people are unaware of how far deep down this culture is so entrenched within our society and so entrenched in our minds. And, I think you can obviously go back and forth as to like what would lead someone into a relationship like this. But I think definitely number one would be social media, socioeconomic background, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that that's something that we all need to be very aware of. We all know that social media can be misleading, Photoshop and taking pictures with someone else's car, house, whatever it may be. And on top of that, now we need to also be thinking about the fact that this person's life is probably not what they are portraying on social media.
Yes, because sometimes with social media and these relationships is that it's easy to accept anything at any given time because it's instant. Somebody in Dubai can DM you and say, I can fly you over, and we can say yes, because you also want to be part of the clique. You also want to have a traveling experience. Or something as simple to say, I just want a weekend away. It's fine. Monday I'll be back. It's not a big deal. But you're not aware that you're getting trafficked. You're just making that small decision by just saying, oh, it's just 2 days, I'll be back. You don't know if you're coming back.
So just touching a little bit more on who you are and the way in which being in the lifestyle has shaped the person that you are today, do you think that if you hadn't had those experiences, what do you think that you would have written about? Do you think that you would have been a writer at all?
I don't know. I think, honestly, it's divine intervention. Sometimes you have to go through something traumatic to have a clear understanding of what it is. And I think I was just purely lucky. I know friends of mine who didn't make it, who became drug addicts. Others had AIDS. Others had kids that their partners didn't want anything to do with. Others had multiple abortions. I also had an abortion. Well, they forced me into an abortion. So there are so many things that I feel like that lifestyle sort of destroyed in me. But I think destiny called, and I was able to change that misfortune into something else. I've been a person who's been driven by education. I'm still studying till today. I have completed a couple of qualifications. And I think other people will not have the same opportunity as me. I knew what my intention was, and I made sure that once I got out, I refocused. You know, it was very hard. It was not like, oh, today I'm out and then tomorrow here I am. I'm gonna be an author. Writing for me came from a very, very dark place because I was very depressed. For a good 3 years, I was depressed. I was not eating. I had a decent eating disorder. I was not eating certain foods because I thought that, remember, over time, you're told you're ugly, you're fat, you're this, you're that. I remember at some point I used to wear weaves because my ex said my hair is so horrible. So for me to pick myself up, writing had to be my source because that's where I could give myself the opportunity to say how I feel. Starting from childhood, that's what Bear the Blesses game starts from, childhood, coming to Johannesburg, the hockey club, what happens in those kind of circles or the secret societies, and then you've got Ego that speaks of the great escape, right? So I use that as a way to heal myself more than anything else. And yes, I understand for other people, it's a story that helps them or it gave them courage or inspired them to do something. But personally, it was my escape and my way of redeeming myself to say, actually, I'm much more than what I was told I was, or what the perception is, you know? Because people were just like, oh, she's just a model, she'll just end up like that. Oh, she just dated that rich guy, she'll never amount to anything else. And you end up doubting your actual skills, your actual talent. Because I started writing like songs and poems and short stories when I was very young. And I would sit with my dad and read all the time, and it became a thing. So harnessing that talent for me was important to say, what am I really good at? Can I make a career out of it? And it looks like I have. it sort of kicked in at the right time. But honestly, it was pure divine intervention. I did not plan it. I didn't say I want to be a writer. I didn't go to school to be a writer. I'm studying criminology, which is way different than writing, you know?
I definitely think that you found such a beautiful way to marry all of your passions and your talents in such a beautiful way. And I think one thing that stands out to me about you is the fact that not only do you write books, you write screenplays, scripts, but as well as that you have your organization. So can you tell me a little bit about your organization?
So in the company where we do the publishing, which is the Fairy Tale Company, we host workshops that help young people sort of create their own writing patterns, how to write, We speak about confidence, peer pressure. We tackle things like your blessers and blessee culture. We go to different schools and donate sanitary pads, educational materials that they might need that's outside the education spectrum. So we do go around and do workshops at different schools and universities. And unfortunately, because now of COVID, we had to stop going to schools. But before lockdown, we were going to universities and high schools. But now it's easier to do it online, but it also limits the amount of people who are able to access the internet. Because our main focus was to going to underprivileged communities to go do it. But now when you look at where those people are, internet is a luxury. It's not easy. So we have suspended that for now. But I think towards springtime, where restrictions are better, we'll go back and do that in community centers and so forth. But that's still something that I'm still going to do regardless. But I am doing it online for those who can. And for those who can't, we're just sending educational materials to their communities.
So just to backtrack a little bit, just to touch briefly on your book, Bear, you spoke a lot about your, well, I mean, the whole book is about your life and where you come from and all of the different experiences that you've gone through. And one thing that I'm very curious to find out a little bit more about is how did your family take your choices?
Because I was in boarding school most of the time, I was not always home. So when I did come back, when I was in Joburg, it was easy for me not to go home, so they didn't really see much of it. My dad only found out about it in the news when the book came out, and they were talking about Bear coming out and the hits that were on me and this person trying to kill me. And my dad was like, why would he try to kill you? What did you do? And then things came out and I had to tell him the truth. And I think at that time I had made peace with what happened because I said, this is a piece of my story. It's not the entire book of my life. It's literally one chapter. I'm going to take charge of it. I'm going to control the narrative of my story. I'm going to sort of copyright it so that I'm the only one who's to tell the story in any kind of way. Yes, you become fearful to tell your parent that, well, I was dating somebody almost your age. But because I had made peace with it, it was easy for me to say, okay, it's in the news already. The newspapers are writing about it. It's on blogs. So let me just tell you, I think what shocked him the most was him hearing that I was gang raped. He was not aware of that. He felt like he could have protected me more. But also the way I had painted him as a father in the book itself was a bit of a body shock because it was like, I didn't think that you perceived me that way. You know, you sometimes think that you're a great person and your children are like, actually, to me, my experience with you is not so great. So he was a bit shocked that I wrote the book the way that I wrote it. But I felt comfortable because it was my truth. It was my experience of him. It was not the ultimate. I was not saying that's all of him. It was just saying, this is my experience of you and this is what I think of you. And over time, we have learned to engage better, like have a proper father and daughter relationship where we are able to discuss things. He has become a huge support structure. Also, he forms part of my security team when I travel because he was in the army. So he knows exactly what to do when I travel. Especially when I go overseas or different provinces. I've had incidences where people try to poison me in restaurants and places. So it gets a little bit tricky. But my dad has grown to accept my career and also fall in love with the writing.
I think just to sort of wrap up our conversation, is there any advice that you would give to young boys and girls that are in these kinds of relationships to help them to get out?
The question is, do they really want to get out? Because we can say there are dangers, and I believe at this point people are aware. If they don't know in this conversation, they could pick up the dangers, right? But it's a personal thing, and we cannot dictate what people must do. But if you do find yourself in a place where you're dating somebody even if they're your age or they're older or they're a different race or they're from a different country and you feel like you need to leave the relationship, follow your gut. Even if you have to go report open a case against someone, do it. Don't feel like you don't have power because somebody is so dominating over you. Speak to people about it. Find a support structure. Find people who will believe you. Should anything happen, like for an example, a rape, a kidnapping, you're forced into drugs, you want to leave an abusive relationship of any kind, whether it's you dating your own boyfriend or you're dating an older guy, but any kind of situation, find a support structure. Believe in your truth. If you feel that you are being treated unfairly or treated badly or you were molested or raped, or believe in that and find ways to get out. There are crisis centers that offer help or support groups that offer help for people who are in GBV related incidences, or you feel it's an unhealthy relationship, whether it is just stressful or you're going into depression. There are foundations and places where you can go. But I do believe if you are really honest with yourself, you know what's right and what's wrong. And sometimes the pressures of life are not the only things you can focus on. There's better things that are yet to come instead of you just focusing on a relationship.
Just to wrap up this episode, I just want to say thank you so much to Jackie. Jackie, where can we find you on social media, get in contact with you?
So my website is jackiephamotse.com and I am on Instagram. It's Jackie_Phamotse. I saw there's a lot of fake accounts, but my one is one with the blue tick. And then on Twitter, it's Jackie Phamotse and Facebook is Jackie Phamotse. And if people want to email me, it's info@jackiephamotse.com.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So just to wrap up this episode, we have touched very briefly on the very in-depth topic of blessers and blessees. We encourage you guys to continue the conversation on your own, and you are more than welcome to get in contact with either one of us to continue the conversation. And just a final thank you so much to Sports Scene, to Reebok, to Black Brick for giving us the space. We really, really do appreciate it. And we hope that you enjoyed watching this episode just as much as we enjoyed filming it. Thank you so much.